Hello everyone and welcome back to Art History Shorts. So I'm going to be continuing on with the series where I'm talking about how male and female artists both portrayed the nude female figure in painting. I started this series with Paula Moddersham-Becker and her self-portrait, and then I talked about Titian's Venus of Urbino. With both of those paintings, I looked at the male gaze, or in Moddersham-Becker's case, the lack of male gaze. But I wanted to do something a little different in this video where I take a look at the artist Henri Matisse and how he approached the female nude figure throughout his career, culminating in the Blue Cutout Nudes that he did just 2 years before he died in 1952. I want to show the progression of his work with the female nude figure and how, in some standards, that progression might seem a little backwards. We often think that the longer someone does something, the better it is that they get at it. And to define better, that could be showing more skill at it was that they were doing. So in terms of art, drawing and painting, let's say, you would imagine that the more an artist worked and the longer they worked, the more skilled they would become. We should, in theory, see highly detailed, incredibly naturalistic masterpieces, essentially like what Titian created with the Venus of Urbino. Much of the art in the Renaissance is this. Michelangelo and Da Vinci, they created these masterful forms of the human body, both incredibly lifelike and yet also idealistic and almost impossible for the human figure to achieve. But after this and over time, things start to shift. If I can make a grand sweeping statement here, it's almost as if artists start to get bored with perfection. In mannerism, we see unnatural alterations to the human form. And then in realism, artists wanted their audience to see real life, people working in the fields, people who are poor, not just mythological beings and royalty. With the invention of photography, we essentially get Impressionism. Artists no longer felt compelled to capture the world exactly as it was around them. The camera can do this. They were asking, what can we as humans do differently? I won't go too far into Impressionism here because I have a video where I do that and you can check it out. But we see these roots of abstraction growing with this idea of how little detail can I give the viewer while still communicating what I want you to see. Artists will of course eventually push this to the point of where there are no distinguishable concepts or imagery to grasp onto. But for now, let's go back to this idea that the longer an artist does something, the better it is they get at it, and look at Matisse in particular and what he did with the female nude form, and how in some ways what he did is the reverse of this concept, creating a more simplified form rather than a highly realistic piece of art. This simplification of form stands for an essence, and this essence becomes a symbol. Symbols move people, often quite literally. Symbols become more than their visual representation. They are visual cues that trigger often complex concepts in our minds. I believe that is what Matisse achieved with his blue nude cutouts. I would say outside of his room interiors, Matisse is most well known for his works with the figure, and he worked extensively with the female nude form. In these sketches of the nude female figure, we see a sort of progression that his work went through. How we go from a more natural figure to shapes and form. And it's not necessarily a linear progression that we're looking at, where he took it from realistic to naturalistic, directly to abstract. He moved through these different ways of presenting the figure, moving back and forth. It's so subtle, these shifts. It's a gentle washing away of the details, like lake water, lapping sandy shores, gently eroding away the interior of the figure. Turning to Matisse's paintings, we see this one that's also titled Blue Nude from 1907. You can see almost the segments of this figure's body, how they have form and structure in a way they're pieced together. You can really see Matisse's interest in sculpture in this painting as well. The pose is exaggerated and dramatic. Here we have the arm raised to the head, her elbow jutting out in a similar way to the Blue Nudes. And the figure's breasts, they feel almost unnatural to me, like two hunks of clay were molded into balls and stuck onto the figure. There is this kind of artificiality to her. In Matisse's Pink Nude, painted in 1935, we have a similar pose to both the 1907 Blue Nude and the 1952 Blue Nudes. The Pink Nude acts as a kind of bridge between these two. The Pink Nude is more abstracted, less human-like, more form-like, but it's not quite broken down into parts of a whole. And we still have the feminine features of a face and hair, but you can really see the direction Matisse is moving in. We are moving toward a minimum amount, to the essential. And then we arrive here to the Blue Nudes. At this point, he'd been working in paper cutouts for almost 10 years because it was easier for him physically due to his failing health, and working from his wheelchair that he needed after 1941. Matisse worked from a model for much of his career, but for the blue cutouts, he created from memory. This lends even further to the idea that what he created was the essential. In a way, don't our memories consist of the most important parts, the essentials of that day or moment we want to recall? So we have these female figures, and it's not their sexuality that becomes the most important part, like with Titian's Venus. It's their fluidity. It's not a sexualness, it's a sensuousness. How the female figure holds itself together, the female holding on to oneself, the emotions, the feelings that the female figure holds within. We could view this as a fragility of their sex, or we could choose to view it as a strength. The way Matisse uses these rounded, organic shapes, the ways that they are allowed to bend, there's this quality of water to them, how water moves to fill the container it is in. It doesn't break down, it shifts. These figures form to fit the shape that they are created inside. There is something very beautiful about this with just a touch of sadness. These figures are symbols of a woman, but of a woman who is free from physical perfection. We see a love of the female body. You really get a feeling that Matisse loved the female form. Just as they can be seen as a symbol of the female form, they are also symbols for the culmination of Matisse's career with the female nude figure. In a way, his work with the female figure can be distilled down to this artwork. So I hope you enjoyed this look at Matisse and his drawings, paintings, and cutouts. If you're really interested in seeing more of his work in person, I recommend checking out the Baltimore Museum of Art. Both the pink and the blue nude paintings are there, and they have a large collection of him because the Cohn sisters were big collectors of his, and they were from Baltimore, and so a lot of the works that they collected ended up there. Next time, I'll be continuing on with another look at how an artist portrayed the female nude figure. So thanks, and I'll see you then.